I'll just request it again. Oh, it still says it's waiting on you. Hey, you guys on Facebook.
It keeps saying my request was not
Um,
sent.
oh, wait. Hey, you guys on Facebook, give us just a minute. We are trying to make sure we are completely set up, and unfortunately, we can't set up without being live. So we got to go live first, and then get everything set up. But there we are. All right. So today's
Hello.
is this is Brittany. So Brittany owns Black History Rocks. And if you guys don't know, we have been partnering to bring a lot of great content about Black women in history who do not get the light shun, who are not in the spotlight often. And so usually
Yes.
on Sundays we go over the following week, but she and I got into this great conversation more so about how we personally parent our kids. And I brought up the fact that I think there's some disconnect when I'm talking to some of my white parents or some white parents in these different groups about raising Black kids because white society actually has a lot more grace than Black kids are given in Black community or however you want to say it. And so I told her, I was like, let's skip talking so much about our week 3 of Black history. Like we're still going to do the content, but we're just not going to do a rehashing or like what is it? Like we're not going to do a
Recap
short talk about, recap. We're not going to do a short talk about that
and
today.
our overview. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do the overview today. We're actually going to continue our conversation that we were having not on live about
Right.
different things that have come up in our life and why we parent. And most of our Black friends and family parent in a similar way that because we're Black and because of how society is. So, are you guys ready for this? If you don't know, if you're new to any of the channels, my name is Kenesha Tillman. I own Tutus and Tennis Shoes, which is a hair care education company. I specialize in teaching white adoptive parents how to take care of Black kids' hair, which is why I end up talking to a lot of white families about more than just hair care. A lot of times it includes discipline and community expectations. So that's why I thought this conversation was great to bring to the live community. So,
Yeah.
Brittany,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
both Brittany and I both have boys, and a little backstory about Brittany and I, we actually went to elementary school together. I don't know like what side of town you grew up on or anything. I think that we did have different upbringing, but a lot of our standard culture or
Or
overall culture in the
similar.
Black community is the same or similar.
Yeah.
So it's interesting as we were talking about our boys, how many things in parenting come up similar. And my son and your son are close to the same age. My son is considered neurotypical, whereas your son is considered, is it
Auti-
atypical?
My oldest
He's
son is
autistic.
high functioning, so he has Asperger's.
But even with that, we still have some commonalities in some of the things that we have to teach our sons to keep us safe. So
Right.
you were explaining to me, let's just talk about haircuts, for instance. How was it? One, was it important to you that you keep your son groomed well? And two, was that a hard concept for him? And how did y'all work through some of that?
Okay, so first I want to say with Jeremiah in particular, because I have two sons, but with Jeremiah who has autism, early intervention became key for me. So at an early age, he had a speech therapist, he had an occupational therapist. He is currently, in therapy. But when it came to picking out barbers and picking out doctors and picking out just people that he has to see on a regular basis, it became a trial and error. So I had to, pick out people who would understand like this is like something that he struggles with, but they're also able um, to, I don't know what the word is, like he can go in and have that authentic like barbershop experience, but they also
Mm-hmm.
understand like this is his this is how he is, like um the introduction to like hair cutting, and they let him like feel the clippers before he actually got the haircut. And then, I had to like prep him and say, okay, well, this is where we're going, and this. But they helped to walk him through it. But it's very
Mm-hmm.
important that he for him to have those experiences, because he
Mm-hmm.
does struggle often with social skills. So, finding people who help him navigate his journey is very important.
So when you for because I hear a lot of parents, they will tell me their child's diagnosis as a reason not to take care of hair. They'll say to me, "Well, my child has is XYZ, so we don't do barbers at all. We don't do this and we don't do that at all." And when I try to explain to them that um unfortunately our society still does not give Black people grace, and so when you raise a child looking unkempt, you're actually putting more barriers in front of them. Do you feel like that is true in your life? Like, if there was ever a time where your son was absolutely against getting his hair cut, would you still have done it because of what I'm telling parents?
I think that when it came to my son, like introducing him to it early on played a crucial role in how he acts now when going to the barbershop. So it was a transitional period for both of us when he was like 3, 4, going. But I felt like doing it early helped him. Like now he can go and he can get a haircut, and it's like no problem because he's used to it and he's been doing it for years. Um, and like I said, his barber, worked with him. Um, but so I say like early, like get it done early. Introduce them to the things that they will have to do for the rest of their life early on, and
Mm-hmm.
then as they get older, it is a whole lot easier to navigate that terrain. So like initially, um, because he's very sensitive to like sounds and touch and textures and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
introducing him early on was very, very important.
Is there any history? Now, see, I tell people that throughout history has proven to us that we do not get that grace where we get to just have a bad hair day, or our kids just get
So
to live by their diagnosis.
yeah, so I think like before we went on live, we had this conversation, and like historically speaking, Black children in particular were not given that grace or luxury. Just speaking historically, because they were enslaved, they were born into enslavement. So when you're born into enslavement, you are at the whim of other people. You're at the whim of your owners, and you're at the whim of like whatever they want you to do. And so we did like Black children were not given the luxury of just being children because they were property. Most of them had to go onto the fields at an early age, like toddler early.
Toddlers. Yeah.
Um, so they were not given that luxury. And I think that, you know, um, in parenting, in parenting, with that understanding, we had to parent our children in a different way. And that has just carried on up till now. Like, you have to, when I had my boys, I think that there's like a level of anxiety, and I think we both discussed that. Like, you realize that, like, yeah, it's exciting that you're pregnant and you're bringing, new life, but it's also a level of fear because you understand that you're bringing in to the world children who are not going to be allowed the luxury of being children. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that in parenting, I've always had to um, make them aware, like, although um, there are these things that are happening, like the world is only going to see you as this. So like with my oldest son, he has an invisible disability, so when you look at him, you don't see his autism. He's highly intelligent, um, but you can't look at him and say, okay, he has autism. And in understanding that, like for me, there's a level of anxiety because I have to raise him to understand that he's a black man, and that's what they're going to see when they encounter him first, and preparing him and making sure that he understands his history and why things are the way that they are, and helping him to navigate life in that sphere.
Mm-hmm. When you say, like, some of the things that we were finding similar is that our boys don't get to have fits, just because they dislike the color of the floor, or the other random things
Yeah,
that kids come up with, right? So, like, all kids are
yeah,
kids. Their brain functions to a certain extent, or functions a certain way at whatever age they are. But with our kids, black kids, and black boys, especially to a certain extent, we have to instill what is considered in the black community home training. And
right.
so it was interesting hearing you agree to some of the same things that I'm saying, even though your son is considered, again, atypical or has autism, and some things are more of a challenge for him to grasp because he doesn't necessarily readily grasp social skills and things like that. But it was still imperative that you brought in these manners and these expectations of him, because although we don't live day in and day out constantly fearing every white person or every policeman or whatever that we see, we still know that that underlying risk is there. And so we don't
Right.
allow our children just to, wild out, for lack of better terms, over
Mhm.
menial stuff.
Because there are
Can
real
you?
consequences to that behavior. We've seen over history, look at, for example, look at Emmett Till. Emmett Till was 14 years old. He was from Chicago and he went down to Mississippi to visit his parents. And the situation that occurred cost him his life.
Right.
So I think that in parenting, particularly black children, you have to know that the history of racism and how our society is is built, and they have to understand that as children, as black children, that their blackness is going to be seen first. And so
Yeah.
that's why I feel like it's very important when parenting, that your child understands their history, like understands where they come from and why things occurred the way that they occurred, so they can have a better grasp on who they are and how
Mm-hmm.
they fit into this world and this society, and so that they can make decisions based upon how they fit into the world.
I agree with that a lot. Like, even with my son, um, and it's not like we waited to a certain age to talk about this. This has been an ongoing, just normal part of life. Just like you talk about every night you need to brush your teeth, and every morning so talking
Right.
about history and talking about it in more than just history started at slavery. So I refused, when my son was younger, especially, to talk to him solely about slavery as the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
Black history. I taught him
Mm-hmm.
that he comes from royalty, and then slavery happened in, somewhere in that lineage, so that he knows that his identity of himself is not always to be of servitude, but also that just because you come from royalty, royal nations, that because we've had this 400 or however long slavery was, we've had this disgusting part of our history. There are still some things that people will not recognize within you. They will not see you as a whole person, or they will not see you as, the intellectual that you are. They will first see you as a servant, because we had this long blip in history where that's what Black people were made to be. And so I think for him and for other children who are giving that foundation, it builds a lot of confidence in them, but it also explains why situations happen when they are dealing with racism, even when it's not overt racism, even when it's not a teacher necessarily calling them a bad name, but it's a teacher constantly calling their name because they aren't sitting and behaving perfectly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they
So Kaden and
understand
I,
those subtle innuendos.
yes, yeah.
Mhm.
Kaden and I had to
Mhm.
learn. Well, Kaden had to be able to pick up on it early. This is first grade. Let's see, when I stopped homeschooling. So about second grade, when he was dual enrolled, and he was at the AB school, whatever that IB school, not AB. That's patterns.
Mhm.
IB school, one of the best ones, but it was best for who? It was mostly white kids in the school, and the black kids that I saw every time I went up there, because I am an active parent, were in the office for some kind of discipline. Or like sometimes I would come and there would be a black kid laid out in the middle of the hall on
Mhm.
in the floor. And they would just act like, well, that's what those kids do. Like, no, that's not what those kids
No.
do. We
Right.
can teach our kids and we can have expectations of them to excel despite diagnosis. And I really, really get hurt and annoyed, to be honest, when I talk to white parents and they lead with diagnosis first, not understanding our history is royal nations first, and
Right.
then the other stuff that happened. So, not to say that these diagnoses don't exist and they don't alter the way that their child thinks or the way that they take in information or the timing that they take it in. But please don't ever believe because of this diagnosis, this child did not come with the genetics to be great. So
Right.
we can't stop it there. When y'all tell me, well, my child has XYZ, whichever alphabet y'all decide to tell me as a reason they can't get their hair done, and you tell me he won't let me, I absolutely know it's you, like as a white parent and parenting, and that disconnect of what a child can do versus what that child is actually capable of. I know I just
And
spilled a bunch of it out there.
I think, like in my experience, just particularly raising my son, and what worked for me. So, like, I operate in this realm of navigating like two spheres: his diagnosis and the reality of just like life, and trying to make sure that he's prepared for life, but also understanding that he still struggles with a lot of things, and
Mm-hmm,
so like making room for trial and error.
mm-hmm,
So he's 13 now, and he I started seeing like signs, just like a little history about my son. I started seeing signs that he there might be other things going on when he was young. He was like one, and
mm-hmm,
he started to do a lot of like he was regressing a lot. So he started talking, then he stopped talking, and then he didn't start back talking until after he had a speech therapist, which was he was like 3, almost 4 when he actually started back talking.
mm-hmm,
And it was just like it kind of like we operated just like in this world of like anxiety. Well, I operated in like a this world of anxiety. But I also was very proactive in getting him the resources that he needed.
mm-hmm,
So I got him. He had occupational therapists. He had speech therapists. Um, and he went to the rehabilitation. So Eggleston has a rehabilitation center, in it's near Scottish Rite in
mm-hmm,
Georgia. And so he would go there every week when he met with his therapist. But I was very, like I kept very detailed notes and all of that. And so I had to be very proactive because I wanted to ensure that I was giving him the best start at life that I could. But also in doing that, I also made it a point to also give him his history so that he
mm-hmm,
understood like his place in this world. And I know like last Sunday I mentioned like in doing history, like when he shows interest, like for a really long time he was interested in fighter jets and airplanes and space exploration
mm-hmm,
and all of that. So it was really important for me that he saw himself represented in
mm-hmm,
that interest. And so he understood like there were people that looked like him that
mm-hmm,
were navigating in this sphere long before today. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is very important. I think it's important to, while you're navigating through that sphere of diagnosing and doctors and therapists and all of that, you have to also, like, on the other end, like, teach them about, how they fit into this world.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that like, my worry is always like double sided. So I,
Mm-hmm.
like, worry about him. I will always worry as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
um, just about my child in general. But I think that I worry about how the world will see him. But I try to give him all the tools necessary to be the best him that he can be. And I think that in giving him those tools, having a firm grasp on history, what he came from, the roadblocks that are set out before him,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that will help him come into, like, be a more well-rounded,
Yeah.
adult. That's how
I
I
think
see it.
while I'm raising my son, I'm always under the mindset that he is going to be a black man. And so what I do now is he's going to spend more time as a black man than he's going to spend as a child. And yes, I still try to give him a lot of innocence in his childhood, but I have to be very proactive about making space to allow that innocence that I think all black children should have, but we still live in a society where it is not granted to us. So I've done the moving around and living in mostly white neighborhoods. Somehow we're one of us is freezing.
And I think
I
it's
think
also important to.
okay, freeze.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It started to freeze.
Okay. I
But
think
I've
it's
done the moving
also.
around and putting him.
I was gonna,
Go
as
ahead.
you were saying, how he's gonna live in this world more time. He's gonna spend more time in this world as a black man than he is as a child. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to note that even in, like, being a child, they're not they're not seen as
Yeah,
a
in the eyes of
child.
society,
Because,
they're
like,
not
my son is
kids.
13 now, and he's going through this really big change where his voice is
Mm-hmm.
drops like several octaves, so he has a deep voice, and he's getting broad shoulders, and he's looking more like a young adult than he
Mm-hmm.
is as a child. And it brings this fear with that change, that the world is not going to see him as a 13-year-old
Mm-hmm.
uh, child. They're going to see him, like, you hear him, you see him walking, you're gonna, there's this preconceived notion that will put him in this fear of being like an adult
Yeah,
before he's
he's even
even
close.
reached that point.
We're going through the same. Caden is 13. Caden is 5'3",
Mm-hmm.
and what was he, 130 pounds or something. He's slim built, he's goofy, he's innocent in his mind, but his body is changing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, even when our kids are little, they're still given higher expectations because we're going back to history. We were supposed to serve as young as toddlers. So even, and this is girls too. So even when we're elementary school age, we are supposed to have this larger idea of responsibility, or there's all these expectations put in our kids, right?
Right.
And then now
Right.
even more so because our kids are coming into a older looking body. So I would have basically set my son up for failure if I waited until now to start having those conversations about what
Right.
society sees him as. So instead I've been
Right.
having conversations, almost, it's not necessary, like a lot of white people like to put it like on a checklist, like, okay, we brushed our teeth today, now I'm going to remind you that you're black, and that history. No, it's not a checklist. Like, you have to get it into a natural rhythm in life where this is what reality is. This does not necessarily mean that you fit this idea of what society says, but just know that when people see you, there's a good chance they are viewing you from this perspective. So now my son is
Right.
coming into his adult body, and we are starting to have more conversations because he's still a kid. So his brain is still wrapped up in whatever game he thinks he's about to go outside and play, whatever. And I'm like, no, it's getting nighttime. I need you closer to the
You
house,
can't.
or I need you to take
Yeah.
that hood off as soon as you hit the door. Like, these little
Right.
different things because I want him alive. At the end of the day,
Right.
like it may seem a little absurd or whatever to somebody else, but I want him alive and I want him to have the opportunity to show his full self. So
Right.
you do live in this kind of paradox where you're trying to give your black child the freedom that you think all children deserve, but you also have to be realistic and know that our society is not quite there yet, you
Right.
know?
And for me, I also, like, I completely agree with you. And like, when talking about, like, you don't just set up this, one time just to say, oh, like a checklist. Oh, did I talk to you about, you do it, it progresses as time goes on. So like, if something happens in the news, I always use that as a prime time to trace it back and say, like, this is the history of this. Or like, if a movie comes out and it's talking about a specific subject, I always use that, especially if it's a movie that he's interested in, like, or if it's something that I find, I'm always sharing and trying to tie it all back, so that both of them have a grasp on, you know, the historical perspective and how
Mm-hmm.
that shaped the our society up to now, and like
Right.
now and moving forward. I'll put them into that example and say, well, this is this, explain it in depth. This is why this is important, and this is how, like, for instance, there's a movie that just came out, that Nate Parker starred in, called American Skin. And in the movie, it, without like giving too much about the movie, but his son was murdered by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had my sons watch the movie, and it, I had to give them the history of, what was happening, and like
Mm-hmm.
talk about stereotypes and talk about, preconceived notions, and how, you are viewed, even as a young person, how you're viewed, and how, you know, although, society, laws say this, you can't just go by that. You have to have this understanding that
Right.
no matter, what you are navigating through your life as
Yeah.
a black man. And so I use those times to pull historical perspectives, like we just watched, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Okay, I haven't
um,
watched it yet.
and it's just, I use those opportunities as time to like really just delve deep into the history of certain things,
Mm-hmm.
because it's piqued their interest, and it's something that they want to know more about. And so we use
Mm-hmm.
those opportunities just to talk about, their place in the world, and how history created the situation that was happening at that time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very important. So those are great times to, like, you know pull in, have those conversations, those,
Mm-hmm.
so
I've done
that's why.
something similar. We'll be watching, whatever, and he may ask a question, and then I'm not a historian like you, but I'll try to be like, okay, well, let's look up this, and that, and let's see if we can tie those connections. You know, even in some of our day to day life, I talk to him. The other thing is, I feel like you kind of do a disservice to black kids when you try to sugarcoat everything. And maybe it's just my personality, but I've never really been big on sugarcoating this what society is like to my son, even when he was younger. That way it wouldn't slap him in the face. And that way when
Right.
he encountered it, he wasn't so caught off guard that he didn't know how to operate within it. And that doesn't mean,
Right.
I'm not teaching my child to always cower or, always, yes, a master, definitely not. That's definitely not us. But there are certain things that he had to know to just to make sure that, I mean, again, most of it is make sure he's going to come home at night, make sure he has the best opportunity possible. And that to me is what I call home training. I know I put home training on all the titles, so I want you guys to kind of understand why I brought it up. Some of the basic rules, manners, mannerisms, expectations that we teach in the black household, uh we consider home training. So it's the basic expectation of how you should behave when you go out into the world, right? um and some of those for black children is also a part of their safety. For instance, with my son, he needs to be able to read my voices. He needs to be able to read my face. I don't have to yell and fuss at him all the time. I don't have to give him long explanations, because there's going to be times, and I really don't even think this is a race thing, but I do think it is more important because we're Black. But there are going to be times when we're out in public when I don't have time to sit there and give him a long dialogue and go back and forth with him about what I just asked him to do. If I just ask you to do it and you hear my tone and you see my face, it needs to happen right now. And maybe it needs to be urgent, and not everybody else around us know it's urgent, so that we can get out of this situation. I don't know if that's solely because of the trauma that I have personally experienced, if that's generational trauma, or if that's like, I don't know what it is, but I know that it has been imperative to our life. Um, and when I talk to other parents, and especially again, usually my conversations are revolving hair care, and it looks that their child has no home training. Everything is a big argument. Everything is a big debate with this kid. I'm like, at some point, this is going to be unsafe, because you have told your child something, looking at the whole situation, taking everything in, and they are standing here debating and arguing with you because as a child, they can only see and understand this small piece of it. How
Right.
do you feel like that rings true for you, or like?
I think that it does ring true for me. I think that you have to, but I think that also, like you said, you don't know if it's like history. I think it's because of the trauma that Black people have faced through enslavement up until now. So you have enslavement, you have the Reconstruction era, you have Jim Crow, you have segregation, you have the Civil Rights Movement, you have the Black Power movement, you have the war on drugs, that movement where, you know, crack flooded the Black communities. So you have all of these instances of trauma throughout the history of Black people in America. And I think that, you know, because of that, we have had to navigate society completely different from any other group. And so, you know, understanding those unspoken words could save your life, because you might, like you said, you might have to leave a certain place, you know, for your safety, and you might not be able to explain it in detail in that moment. So you have to understand that your child is in tune with whatever you're talking to them about, and they understand, you know, like a certain change of tone, you know, that means like we have to go, and there is no questioning it. And I think that, you know, as a parent, and particularly as a Black parent, that is something that we have had to do as a means of survival, as a means of surviving in our day-to-day life. So I think that that becomes something that is done because it's had to be done.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I know sometimes in the Black community, okay, so I'm in this one group called Culturally Fluent Families, and there's a thread going about a virtual cookout, right? And so there's some jokes. Anyway, in that instance, it kind of reminded me of like when Black people are together and that one kid shows up, and because of their behavior, you're like, oh yeah, they have white parents. And it's because not so much that we're cracking jokes at white people or they're bad or anything like that, but it's because that child's behavior is outside the realm of just what we're talking about. Some of this that we in Black households have learned instinctually, even when we can't verbally say, this is why we raise our kids this way, or this is why we have this home training, or this is why we do this and that. We all understand as a collective, like, this is necessary for us. And then you have that one child that's outside the spectrum, like, oh yeah, well, it's because her mom and daddy white, you know, and then sometimes it goes to the extreme where those kids are raised with the grace and the privilege of whiteness that they really don't have in the world. And as soon as they hit, usually by puberty, they hit real life, and society is not accepting those tantrums
No.
or those outbursts, all these things that they have been raised to think that it's okay. And
right.
because they're Black, biracial, you know, light skin and Black is the same thing. Society's gonna push back and really check them hard. And just like I was saying earlier, I didn't wait to a certain date to start talking to my son about this. That way it wouldn't slap him in the face. And a lot of times this is when these kids are slapped in the face that, damn, I'm different. Like, you know, and they can be light, bright, whatever. Biracial, because I get a lot of that. Well, my child is biracial, they're not Black. Okay, keep on. because
Yeah,
it's going
society
to hit
doesn't.
them.
If you're black and you know, you're going to be seen as a black person and you're going to navigate through life as a black person, no matter how much you try to, make, say otherwise. Like, society is going to see you as such and they're going to treat you as such.
I think when we try to gaslight ourselves, our kids, our whatever, into believing that we don't live in that society anymore, we're setting them up for failure. We're not giving them the skills to be able to cope when real life hits them, when their skin is
Right.
thrown back at them. We're not giving them the skills to excel in life. Because again, if you're not like you were talking about, you ground your kids in history, and so that they have confidence and they know where they can see themselves. They have an idea, like, right, of how they can live in this world and still be great in this world, despite. When you don't ground your kids in that and life hits them, then they get confused and they feel like there is no place, or on some levels it's hopeless, or they don't understand. Yes, racism exists, it's horrible, but we have always excelled despite it, you
Right.
know.
I think it's very important to give, well, I guess for me, because I've always been like, Black history has been my passion and it has helped me to evolve and become the person that I am, even before the degrees and even before, where I am now. Like, even as a child, like, there was an understanding that this is an important part of me, and to
Mm-hmm.
see myself represented in these various people and these various um, events that have happened throughout time. But when I had children, I felt that it was particularly important to make sure that they had a firm understanding from infancy, like, that this is who they are and this is
Mm-hmm.
how they will navigate throughout their life, and to understand that. And I think that that is very important. I think that you cannot, it will be very difficult to um, grow up not knowing and then coming to that understanding later in life. I think you'll harbor like a lot of resentment because it's like, you know, there were people doing this and I didn't know, or it does. You don't feel as isolated. That's the word.
Yeah.
You don't feel as isolated when you know that there were people that were out there doing and achieving and making contributions that yeah, it doesn't, that's the word, it's less isolating. You don't feel as isolated, and it helps to build a sense of, I identity. For me, it helped me build my identity, who I am. I'm very, like, my foundation has been set in
Mm-hmm.
the understanding of, the people that I've come from. So I think that that is very important.
I think for me, it definitely set a strong foundation in most ways. Like, and I would compare it to people who are very religious. Their foundation, let's just go with Christianity. Their foundation is set in Christianity, and you can't, nothing you can say further down the line will ever convince them that Christianity isn't real. How they praise their God, Jesus, however you want to say it, um, isn't real, isn't accurate. And so no matter what happens in life, they always have that as their structure for the rest of, for how they perceive everything else in life. And it gives them a lot of strength and confidence. I feel like that's what Blackness in history has been for me. And I feel like most
Right.
Black people who have had a chance to really be immersed in it, their culture is that for them too. So it's don't nobody get it twisted. It's not opposed to religion. It's, its own thing. But because my mother was becoming more aware of positive Black history, when after she had me, she was in California at this time, I was always like backstage at somebody's African dance class or performance, or I was backstage at productions like Alvin Ailey. Or if we're going to fast forward to Atlanta, when the African American arts festival happened every other year, I was always backstage. And so even without having these checklist conversations, I was always engulfed in a variety or a diverse community of Black people being great. Despite all the
Right.
racism that I saw on TV, all the negative events, I knew baseline that there was an opportunity for me to be great in the skin that I'm in, even in this harsh world. And so I try to
Right.
do the same for Caden. I do think in some ways I haven't done as great of a job because I drank the Kool-Aid. I moved to all white neighborhoods and tried all white schools and all this other crap. And it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't worth it. I, in some ways, wish I had been in the heart, dead center of West End Atlanta. I wish I would have stayed over there versus, I mean, we had a nice house in Carlisle, Georgia. I mean, Carlisle, Iowa, but that is also when we hit racism head on, and it was very, very apparent that they were pulling him out of class because he was the only black kid in class, and it took a toll on his confidence. It took a toll on how he viewed education and how excited he was about education. Um,
Right.
I think I didn't say, went all around the world in my rambling.
But no,
But
I think it's important. Like, it comes back to how it's important to just have a firm. It's giving your kids that understanding early on so that it is ingrained in who they are and who they
mhm,
become. Um, and I think like that's what it all boils down to. Like, history is an important aspect of your identity. And I think that because society has tried to demonize black people in general so much, and these stereotypes have become like common. That's what you see. You see more stereotypes, um, and then you see like real life. Like you know, it's 2021, and you shouldn't say like, "Oh, I've never seen a black person doing this. I've never seen a black person doing that. I didn't know that there were movements happening in the 1800s where black people were actually out there making a difference." And I think that when you are rooted in history, you understand that even through all the trauma that, the black community has sustained over, all of this time, that, there were positive things happening. There were
mhm,
positive, people out making a difference. And so, when you look at it in 2021, you're saying, oh, there were, and I think that that was one of the main reasons that we really wanted to do this campaign and
mhm,
highlight these black women, because it shows like there were black women in particular, because we don't really, give, well, black women don't really get the shine that that they deserve. And when you go throughout history, you see that these women were out here doing things. They went from enslaved to working in the White House,
right,
or starting banks, or
right.
creating things that help to make their lives better. So I think that when you are rooted in your history, and your children are rooted in their history, and even if you don't know where to start
Mhm,
initially, to come to the understanding that it needs to happen, that's the
mhm.
first. I think that's the first step, is to say, I need, like, it is imperative that my child, know their history, and then from there you can begin to make the steps to learn.
That's a great
Um,
segue, actually, because I'm looking at the comments on Facebook, and Tracy Vance. Thank you for watching, y'all. And I'm going to look at the comments on Instagram in just a second. But Tracy Vance's question is, how do white parents? How do we teach the right home training? I see the differences in parenting, but not getting what I need to change in my behaviors and parenting style. So I'm going to answer from my perspective first, and then Brittany can answer from hers, and also some of the. She went over some of the ways that she includes history in day-to-day life,
mhm.
and I can go over ways that I included positive affirmations but also on play. So for instance, I think some of the biggest differences in white parenting and black parenting and instilled in home training is black parents don't play with their kids, and they will straight out tell kids, I'm not your friend, I'm not one of your little friends. Like, that is a classic saying in a black household. Yes, they are people, and yes, you don't treat them like they're inadequate as far as being inhuman, but we are not the same. So I'm 36, and for instance, my son is 13. My brain has been here a little bit longer, has been experiencing a little bit more, has a ability to take in more information at one time. I'm not about to stand here and debate with a 13-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old about what's going to happen. So one of the main things that I see that's different is white parents like to stand there and debate with their kids, set an expectation, and then consistently require that they reach that expectation, whether it's about hair, whether it's about the chores, whether it's about education. And not to say that every day is going to be perfect. These are still kids. They're going to do some of what they want to, but don't ever waver on that expectation. Don't ever drop it because such and such got diagnosed with whatever alphabet. If the expectation is we clean our room completely on Friday, then that's going to always be there. And then if they don't, then there's some consequences. And whatever you decide your consequences are in your household, but don't ever, in my opinion, don't ever set the tone that you and your child are friends. You're a parent and you are there to guide them. You are there to run your household. You're the one that pays the bills. You're the one that makes sure all the money, the resources, everything else comes in. Kids can't even, like, their brain is not meant to do all that. And so when you start asking them questions about how to run the rest of the household, you basically setting everybody else up for failure. Why are you letting this 5-year-old tell you that they won't, whatever it is they decided they want? They also think that they can eat crap off the ground outside. Like, they're 5. So, you change that kind of expectation. If you give a child a choice, not to say that little kids or kids in general can't have choices, but give them limited choices. Do you want red bollies in your hair or do you want blue bollies in your hair? I'm not sitting here debating with you about which style you think you want for the next 2-3 hours. I'm not even debating with you about whether or not hair time is going to happen. It's about to happen. And my choices to you are, do you want blue bollies or red ones? Do you want to be miserable all the way through this, hair time? Or do you want to enjoy this tablet and snacks or whatever it is? Those are some of the things I see different. Um, I don't, my son cannot hit me, has never been able to hit me. He can't yell at me. He can't snap at me. And so these things started before he was dang near standing eye to eye with me. These started when he was,
And
one
you
and a
set
half.
those like you
You
said, you
set those
set those
expectations.
expectations early. Yeah,
So I think
it's
a lot of
very
times
important.
when white parents don't have close relationships with other black adults, they come up with this idea that either somehow we're completely magical and our kids just don't act like kids, or that we are abusing them into submission. No, we set the expectations early. They come into this life not knowing how life is at all. And so while we're, shaping their idea of life, we shape their idea of expectations and who's running the household. This 1.5 year
And I think
is
that
not running the
because of
household.
history, yeah, and I think that because of history, we understand that any misstep can end in, it can create a situation, just a trickle down effect of like a situation that you can't come back from. So your
Mm-hmm.
child, like as a parent, as a black parent, you understand, like when you're going out into the world, how the world, especially if you're grounded in your history, you understand like you're going out into this world and you're not going to be just perceived as like, oh, that's just a child acting like a child. And I think that, you know, allowing your child to know that like this is not how the world is going to see you. Like I have those conversations, especially like I said, my oldest son, he's older and he's, hitting puberty and his voice is changing, the composition of his body is changing, his shoulders are getting broader, he's getting taller, and while I still see my baby, I understand that he is, when he walks out of my door, the world is not going to see my baby. It's
Right,
not, they're not
right.
going to see him. They're going to look at him and they're going to see him just the way that they see um, any other black man. So,
Right. So Melinda on Facebook, because Instagram can't see these, says, I know many white people who believe that black parents make their kids afraid of them, and that's why they behave. This is a huge stereotype, and it's so wrong.
No,
No,
I don't
it's
know.
not. Like, my son is not afraid of me. He respects me, and he understands that what I say goes because I'm the one running the house. Like, that's not a fear. That's a realistic, just understanding. Do you like your
Right.
are your kids afraid of you?
No, and I've cultivated the relationship that I have with both of my boys. Like I let them know that they have an open door to come and talk to me about anything. They don't
Mm-hmm.
fear me. Anything that they have questions about, because I've cultivated that relationship from infancy, they know like I can talk to her about anything. They're not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's just how you approach the situation, like approach your, you know, parenting. I don't know, the way that you approach like your ideas about how you are raising, your child in this society. But no, I definitely
My
don't raise
my
them
son
to
knows
be
he can come
afraid of
talk to me about
at all.
anything. We've been through hard times, and in that moment, it wasn't a lot of dialogue because in that moment we needed to get through whatever it was. But afterwards, if when he was ready to process or he needed to process, he knows good and well, or he has shown me that he knows good and well that he can ask questions and want to understand why I made the choices that I made and tell me how he felt about it. It's not that our children are not able to express how they feel. But they can't tell me he can't tell me he wish I was dead. He can't
Yeah,
be
no.
disrespectful about it. And that's a difference. It's
Yeah.
not that these conversations aren't happening in our household, but it is different than being disrespectful. So you don't like what I just did, or you don't like that I just told you that these chores need to be done. That's fine. You don't have to like it. The chores are going to get done. We can talk about the fact you didn't like it. We can talk about how you would, maybe want to do it differently the next time. We can have that conversation. Does not necessarily mean it's going to change. It might, though. I've had opportunities where I needed to apologize to my son. I did. I did apologize
Right.
because I realized
And I
that
think that that's very important as well, because I've had
yeah,
those instances as well. And I think that it teaches them that we're all human. And in our, day to day lives, we might do things that are not, that need to be, walked back and they need to understand, like, if my mom will come back and apologize, then it's okay. You know what I mean? So you lead
yeah.
by example.
But that is
So
not,
I've
but
had
those
to
things
do
aren't mutually exclusive. So I don't have to be so hard and cold to my child to get him to understand how this household works and to get him to understand hierarchy, I guess, for lack of better words, but how to respect adults, but still, like, this is not these are not mutually exclusive. He does not have to be disrespectful to have body autonomy or to be confident or to be able to speak out for himself. No, he doesn't have to be wild and unruly to be able to do those things. He can be respectful and understand that when an adult tells him to do something, as long as it's not harmful to him or somebody else, that he's expected to do that, and then that there's a time and a place or a way to express what he didn't like about it, or whatever it might be. And I think when I'm talking to white parents, they think it's very either or, that if they tell their child, no, you're going to sit down and get your hair done, that somehow their child will be open to rape and all these other things because they have taught them not to have body autonomy. I don't know how y'all get to that extreme, but that's not the way it works in black households. And I wish I was able to verbalize better how we make that balance, but it is happening. Melinda says, and say what you mean and mean what you say. So many white friends are wishy-washy. Yeah, you can't play with kids like that. Sorry, I guess I should put this up there so people can see it. You can't play with I don't think you can play with any kids with like that. I think even when white parents parent their white children that way, it develops a lot of the issues that we have in society, where these children grow up to be an adult thinking that all rules are meant for them to walk over, all boundaries are meant for them to walk over. Are some boundaries not good? Yes. Are some rules not fair? Yes. And we do need to change them, but not all of them. Some of them help us as a society work together. So I think white kids, and when they become adults, feel like when they walk into any room, the room should cave to them and coddle to them. and they forget that it's a whole community, because as a child, that's what was set, like that was the precedent that was set in their household. Everything revolved around just them and what they thought. That's not realistic. That's not how the world works. So I think it's important that all parents um truly learn how to be consistent and confident in their parenting and leading their children, and understand that these children are learning the same skills to be able to repeat them when they get to be an adult, and they are better community members because they do respect other people's boundaries, and they can infer which rules need to be adjusted to fit everybody, not just them. Does that, I feel like I rambled so much that it kind of didn't make sense.
No, I think that no, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Tracy Vance on Facebook says, how to course correct. I was not firm with my girls early on, and I'm getting this kind of disrespectful behavior. Timeouts and loss of privileges are not working. For me, when my son, so again, I started really young, but really young, my son, this is my little short story. So my son, he's very intellectual. And when he was about 3, he told me, I had told him to stop doing something. I had just started making him jog in our yard or whatever. And so he was getting ready to do something else. And I'm like, didn't I tell you not to do that? Well, if I do it, this is him asking me the question. Well, if I do it, how many laps am I going to have to run? I said, oh, so you think this is a game? You think that you get to figure out whether or not you want to do this?
He's
behavior.
Figured out the consequences. Like, he knows it's gonna yield something. Yeah.
So he decided to try to, so what I did was
one up you.
The whole point, Tracy, is sometimes you have to be more creative to your kids. Make them think you're a little bit crazy sometimes. It's okay. So I said, okay, well, we're not going to count laps anymore. You're not going to get a particular amount of laps when you do something. Because that's the way I started. I'm like, oh, you kept doing that. I had to tell you 3 times you're going to do 3 laps, right? So I was like, no, do it again, and you're going to run until I get tired. And then he was like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know when she's going to get tired. And he still tried it. And so, yeah, I said, you like to repeat behaviors until I'm tired of talking. So you're going to jog until you're tired because you now made me tired. So little things like that. Was it abuse? No. He's a great athlete. He's a great athlete when he dedicates himself. We do wall sits. I've done wall sits with girls too. I kind of don't really care whether it's a girl or a boy. If I'm gonna have to keep talking to you, you don't want to hear what I'm saying. You're making my nerves hurt. I'm about to make your muscles hurt. Do a wall sit. And like within 2 minutes, they are rethinking their whole life at that moment. I don't even want to do wall sits. They don't want to do wall sits. And so you just ask them, are you tired of sitting on that wall? Okay, so can you do what I just asked you to do? No, we're not going to debate about it. So Tracy, I would say to be more consistent. And they gonna cry and they gonna tell you they don't like it and it's the end of the world. Kids are dramatic. Ignore it. Keep it moving. And just
I think consistency is the key word. You have to be consistent with it.
Yeah. Let me check Instagram. Scotty Styles said, grateful for this discussion. I have love for you guys to host a conversation like this on Clubhouse too. Brittany, do you have iPhone? Okay, so that's out the question.
I'm not on Clubhouse.
I have a bunch of invites, but anyway, Scotty had to go. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Shauna, One Rise E-Piece, I think, Earth Hand Fire, Marlon, Laura, Matthew. We had quite a few people. Sarah says, I have an 8-year-old foster daughter. What is the best way to teach respect? Don't accept anything less. When they talk to you like you're their little friend, correct them. I correct anybody's kids. I don't care if I don't know them. So, if it's a kid starts talking to me, Miss Kenesha, because that lets you know I'm not the same age as you, Miss Kenesha. If they bust in, say excuse me first, and don't answer them when they're using disrespectful behavior. If you keep answering them and giving in to them having fits and being disrespectful, guess what behavior they're going to repeat? That exactly that. So, when you have kids that are disrespectful or they want to keep interrupting, did you say excuse me first? Okay, then stop talking. And then you keep on doing what you're doing until they say excuse me, or they address you the way that you would like for them to address you. If they're hitting you, don't accept it. Now that's a foster kid, and I'm not gonna get on here and say hit your kids, but when they hit you, have a consistent consequence, whatever it is, and don't ever waver on it. When I was fostering, the two boys, and it was informally. The 2-year-old even caught on. Now he's 2 and nonverbal in some ways, probably was behind on some of his milestones. He caught on real quick that some of the stuff that he was doing at home with mom, he couldn't do with Miss Kenesha. I don't care how young your child is, for the most part, whatever and how they came to you, for in general, once you set the stage, they will learn to work within that environment. You'll notice with kids that when they go to school, they behave differently than when they're at home. Or some of y'all have noticed when you take your child to the black salon, they don't play all that stuff that they play with you at home, because they realize very early on how to manipulate situations, or which situations can and cannot be manipulated. Okay, so that was the end of the questions on Instagram. And we got to the end of the questions on Facebook. So, Brittany,
Okay.
did you want to? We've been on here forever and a day. It's been an hour.
I think we've been on an hour. I guess
Yeah.
we can go over, if you want to, this next week. We can just talk a little bit about the upcoming week. The theme for this week is beauty and entertainment, and
Yeah.
we decided to highlight women who made contributions that I feel like some women that made some major contributions to our society. In particular, like we're highlighting Marjorie Stewart Joyner, who created and patented the permanent wave machine, and Christina Jenkins, who she created the hair weave and the sewing method for, weaving in hair into your hair,
Yeah.
weave into your hair that makes it look natural and not
So that whole
bulky.
track,
uh, I'm sorry, say it again.
that whole track, we, and so a lot of white parents won't know what I'm talking
Oh.
about, but hair that comes on basically a seam is called a track.
Hmm.
And Christina Jenkins invented that track and being able to sew hair in.
And sewing it in, the method of actually sewing it. So she developed that, and then she applied and got her patent for it, and then she also went out and taught people how to use her method to put in
Wow.
hair weave into your hair. We're gonna highlight Billie Holiday, who was a jazz singer. Lisa Price, who is the founder of Carol's Daughter, and I think that her story is particularly interesting and needs to be highlighted because she took a hobby and created it into a multi-million-dollar uh,
Business.
company.
Yeah.
We have Josephine Baker, and we have Jackie Moms Mabley, who was a comedian. And I think it's very interesting, her story as well. She created a whole avenue for herself, and I think it's very important because at that time there weren't there weren't a lot of like well known black women comedians. There were some,
Mhm.
but I think that she helped to usher in this wave of comedy for black women, and there was an avenue for that. So I think that it's very important to highlight her. And we're also going to talk about Nina Mae McKinney, who she was an actress, and she was the first black woman to have a leading role in Hollywood. But because of the roles that were available for black women, the stereotypical roles, she was not able to make a success, in my opinion, here in America. So she went
Mhm.
overseas and worked on films overseas. So I think it's really important to highlight her. So those are some of the people that those are the people that we're gonna be talking about for the
I am
upcoming
pretty
week.
excited, as usual, to go into our following week of Black History. And if you guys don't know, we also extended it into next month for Women's History. Before we get off here, just to kind of bring it full circle, when you look at the people that we highlight for Black History and their success, understand that whatever person we're highlighting, they had to work twice as hard because they were Black. And if you look at the timing, especially the ones that are like coming through the 1920s or 1800s, they had most obstacles against them. So think about what kind of person you have to be to achieve these great things during these times and despite the challenges. These are people who had excellent um, discipline within themselves,
Mm-hmm.
integrity, work ethic, and they understood cultural cues very well. So even though we have been talking about like our own kids and how to raise them, it all comes full circle. Because if your kids have this delusion of what society is or what being black in society is, if they don't have the work ethic, which I'm not gonna front to y'all, like I'm like our household is perfect. My son is working on his work ethic. Like that is something we are intentionally working on right now.
It's
Because as a
constant. Yeah, it's a
yeah, it's
constant thing.
constant. But especially as a black
Mm-hmm.
person, society, you're going to have to do at least twice as much to be able to achieve in life because you're in this black body. So when y'all are working with your kids, and I'm talking especially to white parents, know that your white kids would have been able to get away with some of these behaviors or being disrespectful or not having work ethic, but your black kids are not going to be able to do the same thing. So if you're a household with white and black kids, bio, whatever, put everybody on the standard, black standards. Make everybody learn how to be respectful, and make everybody learn how to work twice as hard and really earn their achievements, because black kids don't get to just slide by. They actually have to earn them, whereas white kids sometimes just get to slide by. Put everybody on the black standards, okay? Just do the whole household. I hope I brought it full circle and you guys kind of understand the importance of this, and you understand that you can look throughout history and find black people who have been through trauma, who have been um, who probably, if those diagnoses were, I don't think that's word, if the diagnosis was available, they probably would have qualified for them, but
Mm-hmm.
there was no
Yeah.
healthcare whatever, so it went unnoticed. All these things have never been a reason to not achieve, or a reason that somehow in history black people stopped achieving. So when you are looking at your child is going to be an adult and they're going to come into society, and they can be just as great if not greater if you don't hold them back because of their diagnosis, or you don't hold them back giving them this white privilege that won't be there for them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That makes
All right.
perfect sense. Wrapped it up
I
perfect. Oh,
What's up? Oh yeah. Cheers.
I got your mug.
Wait,
Yay.
put it in the camera. There we go. I
Wait,
was here with this.
I got Kanisha. This is the enamel one. I just
This is
got
the
it in
regular
the
one.
mail and it is awesome. So I
So if
wanted
you
to
guys,
highlight you.
thank you. If you guys would like a cute teacup that's tutus and tennis shoes, go to the website. You can pick it out. It's in the links on Instagram. It's in the links on Facebook. You have to go to the website. So
I love the
tutustenisshoes.com.
saying, take the
Thank you.
kinks out of your mind, not her hair.
Yes. Tracy, you are welcome as usual. Thank you to everybody that tuned in, especially for this long chat. If um
Yeah.
if I ever decide to host a clubhouse, I've just been using Clubhouse to listen to other business professionals. But if I ever decide to host a clubhouse, you guys will definitely know. If you have taken the premium course or you are in the post class hangout group, remember Wednesday is Well Done Wednesday. So you guys jump on that Zoom call. I think this week I will go over cornrows. If I forget, y'all just remind me. Okay. So I will see y'all later. Melinda said, thank you. You're welcome. No problem.
You're
Thank you, Brittany, for
welcome.
joining us.
You're welcome. This was fun.
All
Bye bye.
right.